Here in the UK, King Charles has thanked everyone who sent him messages of support since his cancer diagnosis.
12 cities disrupted. 9 riot incidents in just 7 days. Over 3,400 officers deployed, stretched to the limit, and in some areas, completely overwhelmed. Public order costs soared to £41 million in a single month. That is the Britain King Charles looked out upon this week, and only then decided to speak. After weeks of unrest, anti-racism marches turning into street clashes, anti-immigration groups confronting counter-protests, neighborhoods on edge, and police forces openly warning they are at structural breaking point, the king finally stepped forward with a royal message calling for unity, mutual respect, and shared values. Beautiful words, lovely sentiment, utterly, spectacularly useless. Because let's be honest, this is not 1977. And it's not 2012. This is modern Britain. Modern Britain no longer turns to the crown for strength. It turns to power. And the real power sits with Keir Starmer, whether the public trusts him or not. While Charles stands by a microphone, speaking softly about community spirit, Starmer's government drafts emergency directives, restricts demonstrations, deploys specialist units, and quietly prepares for more unrest they know is coming. No wonder the public reacted to Charles's speech not with reassurance, but with a collective, exhausted eye roll. Nice message, Your Majesty. It won't stop tomorrow's riot. Where was this talk of unity a month ago? Bring back Elizabeth. At least she felt like stability. Because that is the real mood across Britain right now. People don't feel reassured. They feel unprotected. And everyone knows the man wearing the crown is not the one running the country. Which leaves Britain with a single, haunting question whispered in pubs, living rooms, and across social media the moment Charles finished speaking. If the king can't calm the nation, and Starmer won't, who will? And if you want reporting that doesn't pretend everything is fine, take a second to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps. Britain entered this week already stretched thin. Neighborhoods unsettled. Police forces running on fumes. Another wave of unrest simmering just beneath the surface. It has been one of the most volatile months since the early 2000s, the kind where people wake up bracing for whatever goes wrong next. Yet in the middle of this pressure, King Charles chose this moment to step forward with a soft royal plea for unity and shared values, as if the country had simply forgotten to hold hands. The reaction was immediate, too late, too vague, utterly disconnected from the nation he was trying to calm. People weren't waiting for a monarch's reassurance. They were waiting for a government that could stop the slide. Because while Charles spoke gently about community spirit, the ground reality looked nothing like the picture he painted. Streets in multiple cities had already seen pockets of unrest throughout the week. Not full riots, but enough clashes, arrests, and standoffs that police commanders privately admitted they were one incident away from escalation. Officers described a slow burn of tension, the kind that doesn't break in a headline, but gathers force day by day. Shops in multiple regions quietly closed early, not out of panic, but because managers didn't want to gamble. Parents called in their teenagers before sunset. Councils sent late-night emails warning residents to avoid certain areas, phrased politely, but carrying a clear, unmistakable sense of worry. And into King Charles issued a message calling for unity. Yet in the current atmosphere, it felt like a speech written in another century. Charles praised the spirit of togetherness that supposedly guided Britain through the past week. But for viewers at home, one question hung in the air. Unity? Where? On which street? In which neighborhood? In a country that has spent the last month arguing, protesting, clashing, and questioning its institutions. It wasn't malice, and it wasn't indifference. It was simply a speech from a man no longer at the center of Britain's political storm. Modern Britain has changed. The monarchy has not. And the deeper truth, which every viewer sensed but few broadcasters dared state, is this: Charles can call for unity as much as he likes, but it won't change the reality over which Keir Starmer presides. For better or worse, the real power no longer sits in the palace. It sits in Downing Street, in the hands of a prime minister whose grip on the moment feels as fragile as the calm he promises. Communities didn't dismiss Charles because they disliked him. They dismissed him because his words can't move the machinery that governs policing, protests, immigration, or social disorder. People listened politely and then returned to the pressing question. Why was Starmer nowhere to be seen during one of the most strained weeks of his leadership? Britain isn't rejecting the monarchy. It's rejecting the illusion that the monarchy can save it. And as the country waits for Starmer's next move or misstep, Charles' speech serves not as a moment of unity, but as a stark reminder of something far more uncomfortable. Britain today doesn't need a symbolic voice. It needs a functioning one. If Charles' speech revealed how detached the monarchy is from the country's mood, the aftermath exposed something worse. How far the British state itself has drifted from the lived reality of the people it governs. While the king spoke of mutual respect, the streets told a different story. Exhausted communities, overstretched institutions, and a government more concerned with managing optics than outcomes. Across several cities, residents described a disturbing pattern. Moments of calm punctuated by sudden surges of disorder, police arriving late or not at all, and neighborhood tensions simmering with a volatility no royal address could paper over. In the Midlands, one local official admitted that no one trusts the daily reassurances anymore. Everyone believes we are one misstep away from another eruption. In parts of Greater Manchester, community leaders said they were relieved the weekend didn't spiral, not because tensions were lower, but because nothing happened at the wrong place at the wrong time. This is the Britain Charles didn't address, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. The monarchy has become a spectator, watching a political arena that has outgrown ceremonial comfort. At the center of that arena is Keir Starmer, whose response to the past month's unrest has left millions asking a growingly uncomfortable question. Does he actually have a strategy, or is he simply hoping the storm passes? Inside the Home Office, senior staff admitted that policing resources are running on a knife's edge. Multiple forces confirmed they had already exhausted emergency funding allocations meant to last until spring. Commanders spoke of morale shock, resilience fatigue, and a relentless pressure cycle driven by protest waves, immigration tensions, and rising distrust between communities. None of this appeared in Charles's carefully scripted remarks. None of it was even hinted at. Instead, the public was once again told to stand together. But standing together becomes impossible when the institutions charged with keeping order can barely stand themselves. As one senior policing advisor put it bluntly, when you have a king speaking as if everything is symbolic and a prime minister acting as if everything is manageable, the public knows someone is lying. They just can't decide who. And that, more than any headline or speech, is the real crisis unfolding. A catastrophic collapse of confidence, not in the nation's values, but in its ability to enforce them. Britain is asking a difficult question: who really leads the nation? Communities no longer feel that London understands what they're experiencing. London, in turn, seems unable to grasp the strain that local institutions are under. In the middle of this disconnect sits a monarch offering comforting words no one asked for, and a prime minister offering political steadiness no one can feel. Even Starmer's closest allies admit privately that public trust is quietly slipping, not turning against him, not rising up, just slipping. It's a slow erosion, subtle but far more dangerous for a leader whose promise was to restore stability. Because nothing this month feels stable. Not the streets, not the councils, not the police, and certainly not the public's patience. Charles's speech tried to create an illusion of calm. Starmer's silence allowed the reality of chaos to deepen. Between the two, Britain found itself in a vacuum, a country waiting for leadership that never arrives, from the palace or Downing Street. The monarchy cannot steady the moment. The government cannot contain it, and the public cannot ignore it. That is Britain today, a nation holding its breath, not because the king asked for unity, but because no one in power seems capable of delivering it. This week made it unmistakably clear, clearer than any royal speech, clearer than any Downing Street briefing, that Britain's crisis is not just on the streets. It is inside the institutions meant to guide the country through moments like these. For decades, through recessions, terror scares, wars, and political upheavals, the monarchy served as an emotional stabilizer, a symbolic weight that kept the national balance steady. Elizabeth II could address a shaken nation, and even if nothing truly changed, people felt anchored. But this week, watching Charles deliver polished lines about mutual respect, the country didn't feel anchored. It felt unconvinced, as if the words were coming from someone reading a national mood board rather than confronting a national emergency. The floor is now laid bare. Britain no longer believes its symbolic stabilizers can stabilize anything. The monarchy cannot do it. The Prime Minister will not do it. Responsibility has quietly slid onto institutions barely equipped for the burden. Police forces are strained to breaking point. Councils are overwhelmed. Local authorities begging for guidance they never receive. Communities are forced to act as first responders whenever tensions flare faster than the state can react. Meanwhile, Charles speaks about unity, and Starmer retreats into the polished corridors of Number 10, issuing carefully worded statements that sound fame but say very little. One senior officer, speaking anonymously, put it bluntly, "People want order, but they can see the Crown can't provide it, and the government can barely pretend to." It's not just a policing issue. It's a credibility issue. While the palace performs calm and the government performs competence, the public performs something else entirely: endurance. Britons are enduring more than their leaders acknowledge. Stretched public services, neighborhood tensions heightened by misinformation and migration disputes, institutions increasingly distant from daily life. And in the middle of that endurance sits a prime minister whose authority feels fragile, not collapsing, not crumbling, but thinning, becoming harder to feel, harder to trust, harder to believe in. When community organizers in Birmingham were asked if Charles's speech changed anything, one replied, "It sounded nice, but the situation isn't nice. We don't need poetry. We need decisions." London volunteers, asked whether Starmer's statements reassured them, said, "He says things are under control. We live here. We know they are not." A teacher in Leeds added, "We've been warning them for months. They don't hear us until something explodes." These aren't outliers. These are the voices filling the political vacuum. Voices absent from royal addresses or Number 10 press releases, yet now shaping the national psyche more powerfully than either. This is the truth neither the palace nor the government seems willing to confront. Britain is not struggling because people are divided. Britain is struggling because people feel left to hold the country together themselves. And when leadership feels absent, symbolically and politically, the public notices. Charles's message tried to soothe. Starmer's tactics attempt to manage. But neither addresses the uncomfortable truth. The institutions that once defined Britain no longer define its stability. Communities feel unprotected. Policing feels reactive rather than preventative. Downing Street manages spreadsheets rather than a country. And the monarchy's reassurances feel like echoes from a different era. Whether the government admits it or Charles acknowledges it, the question hanging over the nation is no longer about unity. It is about credibility. Who still has it? Who has lost it? And who, if anyone, can regain it? This week made one thing painfully clear. If the Crown cannot calm the nation, and the government cannot control it, stability will not be inherited. It must be earned. So, as the dust settles, Britain is left with a king offering comfort, a prime minister offering control, and a public believing neither. Unity cannot be declared from a palace balcony. Stability cannot be managed from behind a lectern. People want clarity. They want accountability. They want someone who truly understands the scale of what the country is enduring. Tonight's question is simple. Who do you trust to steady Britain? The Crown, the government, or no one at all? Comment below, because your answer speaks louder about the state of this nation than any royal speech ever could.